Welcome to City Inside Out. Today we confront head-on the issue of whether Seattle's school superintendent Joseph Olszewski should keep his job. Many education groups have called for him to resign amid growing financial problems at the district. We will talk one-on-one with the superintendent this hour. And later, the president of the Teachers Union joins us. He has declared his no confidence in the superintendent. Do Seattle Public Schools need a new leader? That's our topic right after the news. Dateline Olympia. Greg Nichols has been lobbing some verbal grenades at state lawmakers of late. First, the mayor attacked a Gary Locke-supported plan to alter the way business and occupation taxes are collected. Nichols claims the change would cost the already cash-strapped city of Seattle another $15 million per year in lost revenue. The mayor favors some simplification of the B&O, but not, he says, a wholesale reversal of the way the tax has been levied for over 50 years. Nichols also had strong words for state senators. They don't care enough about the Alaskan Way Viaduct, he claims. The state Senate transportation plan would provide only $45 million for the aging structure. Nichols prefers the state House plan. No wonder it calls for $100 million for the viaduct. The mayor has just a few weeks to press his case before the Olympia session ends. Anti-war demonstrators are still protesting what they consider harsh treatment by police. Now comes another complaint about the city's heavy hand, this time from dog owners. Seattle's animal laws, they argue, have been too quick to label dogs as dangerous. Moreover, they leave almost no room for owners to appeal citations. A city council staffer explained to lawmakers this week just what has dog owners barking.
The problems arose in the implementation, I would say, of this law. There seemed to be some confusion on the part of animal control enforcement officers about what potentially dangerous was. And so occasionally tickets were, these were not tickets, these were warnings only. Warnings were issued on the basis of dogs barking at each other or at another person or something. And a number of Seattle residents became very concerned about the possibility that their dog might eventually be declared dangerous on the basis of these potentially dangerous warnings, and that they might lose their dog.
New rules being considered would clarify the criteria by which dogs are tagged dangerous. Some pet owners say the current law doesn't effectively distinguish between mere aggressive barking and full-scale maulings. Cats, too, would get a break under animal policies being considered. The new rules would prohibit residents from setting cat traps on their property without first alerting neighbors. Right now, no notification is required. More news, local news rather, in the war on terrorism. The Seattle Fire Department this week unveiled some of its latest gadgetry. One 007-like item is the RadSmart, a handheld radiation detection device. This and other high-tech tools come to Seattle from a little-known federal agency. It's called the Technical Support Working Group and helps local governments with the latest in terrorism combat technologies. It is the trail that seemed to prevail this week at City Hall. In a preliminary vote, the council approved extending the popular Burt Gilman path through Ballard. The mayor had pushed hard for the extension, and this early vote indicates that he will very likely win. Some local businesses in that part of town, however, see it as a loss. They worry about the safety of mixing recreation and industry. Council member Richard McIver took their side. Heidi Wills took the other.
I don't think the problem are the trucks or the bicyclists along Shill Shoal, but it's for the trucks pulling in and out of those driveways into Shill Shoal. And this is a compromise that bypasses those businesses that do have a lot of truck trips.
While you will still have a grade-separated pathway north of Vernon or northwest of Vernon, I think you're still creating a mix that I just don't feel is safe. I don't feel it is as fluid as it could be.
The preliminary vote was 4-2 in favor of the trail extension. A final roll call is expected soon, likely favoring the Burt Gilman proponents. 'Tis the season of new advisory panels. Just a few weeks back, the council created an oversight group for City Light. This week, they've done the same with the monorail. Who knows what group they may convene next week? The idea in both instances is to gather experts for advice on technical and financial issues. The Monorail Advisory Panel will be separate from the monorail organization and will act as a kind of watchdog. And speaking of the monorail, this week leaders published a preferred alternative for the line between Ballard and West Seattle. Voters last fall, of course, approved the project, but some of the specifics, including which side of the street the trains will travel, the station locations, and some routing decisions, were left to monorail leaders to work out. The preferred alternative represents their best thinking at this point. That plan now undergoes environmental review along with other possible routes. A decision on exactly which and on which stations will be made by the end of the year. That's quite soon as large projects go. Indeed, a new outside review of the monorail praises the group for its speed and says that making decisions so swiftly is saving taxpayers money. Well, here's a story. There was a public hearing this week about whether the city will allow new adult cabaret venues, i.e. strip clubs, a classic clash of values, die-hard adherents of free expression against upholders of moral rectitude, passion overdrive. Only problem, not a single person showed up to testify. A public hearing with no public.
Is there a public hearing on this? Is anyone here for the public hearing on this topic? No. Okay, public hearing is closed.
Anticlimactic or what? The big public hearing about more adult entertainment clubs was a big dud. The council is thus very likely to preserve the status quo and keep the existing moratorium in place. And now for our regular neighborhood roundup. Here's what our lasso roped up this week. First, from Lower Queen Anne, or is it Uptown? Residents there are hoping it's the latter. The community is lobbying the city to install signs that say, "Welcome to Uptown." They want to change how people refer to their neighborhood. We'll see if it takes. And this happy news to report from Woodland Park Zoo. 2 Sumatran tiger cubs went on display this week. The pair were born last December, but because of their fragility, they were not open to public view until this past Sunday. Both little girls can now be visited daily from 11 to 2. Sumatran tigers are quite rare. Only 400 of them remain in the wild throughout the world. And while we're at Woodland Park Zoo, another milestone to announce. Remember baby Hansa, the Asian elephant born a few years back? Well, she surpassed 1 ton recently. Anymore, and she'll be ready for the Atkins diet. And this from South Park. Something stinks down there, but no one can quite pin down exactly what it is. Local residents say it's from a nearby cement plant, but a recent government report says the culprit may also include a landfill and sewer vents. The mystery continues, and so does the aroma. And now onto our city inside-out calendar of events in the upcoming weeks. A couple of happenings from the environmental world. There will be a rain barrel sale at Magnuson Park on Saturday, April 12th. Barrels allow you to collect rainwater for later use. And there is a Master Gardener Plant and Garden Fair on Saturday, the 12th and 13th. The Seattle Public Library's annual Spring Book Fair will be next weekend, also April 12th and 13th, out at Sandpoint. Find some great old and surplus books for your own collection. And 4 district council meetings to announce. Many neighborhood planning decisions are made at these gatherings. East District Council meets on Monday the 14th. Magnolia Queen Anne meets on the 14th as well. The Delridge District Council is on Wednesday the 16th, and Southeast gathers on the 17th. And finally, this calendar item, now through the 12th, is Youth Appreciation Week, meant to coincide with spring break. This 9-day celebration includes many activities for vacationing school kids, including basketball, barbecues, bingo, talent shows, movie nights, pool parties, and much more. A great way for students to stay out of trouble. If you would like more information about any of these events, we provide one-stop referrals from our website at www.seattlechannel.org. And finally today, yet another baby boomer turns 50 years old, the city of Bellevue. Once a bedroom community for Seattle, Bellevue has become a major urban center in its own right, the 5th largest city in Washington. Here's a history question. Where does the name Bellevue come from? If you guessed it's French for beautiful view, we'd give you partial credit. It is indeed that, but that's not the direct namesake. The city was actually christened by one of its early settlers who had emigrated from, well, Bellevue, Indiana. Who would have thought they were Hoosiers over there on the east side? And that's a wrap for our news. Up next, we tackle the important topic of leadership at Seattle Public Schools. Superintendent Joseph Olszewski joins us. He is under mounting criticism to step down because of budget problems. And later, we meet the head of the teachers union, who says it's time for the superintendent to go. All that ahead when City Inside Out continues in a moment. We now welcome Joseph Olszewski. He is the superintendent of Seattle Public Schools. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Your tenure is back on the front pages
Yes,
of
it
papers.
is.
The teachers union's taking a vote this week. The principals are taking a vote this week. An audit about the
Yes.
financial condition of the district is set to
Forthcoming.
be reported. What do you say about your tenure at this point? Are you still the right guy for this job?
Well, I understand why people are very upset, very angry about the financial crisis that hit us this year. I'm angry too. I mean, it's something that shouldn't have happened. It is outrageous. I knew very well when we identified the crisis last fall that I had to take full responsibility for it, full responsibility for the problem, and full responsibility for the solution. And I know very well when you take responsibility, you become a lightning rod, and I accept that it comes with leadership, it comes with being the superintendent.
And full responsibility for the problem. It's a $35 million budget shortfall. You overspent.
22 million from last year that we've now funded with our existing reserves. And then our budget this year was unbalanced by 12 million, and now we put it back in balance. We're going to finish the year in the black.
$35 million problem, however.
Combined, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Was it your fault?
Oh, when you're the leader of an institution, ultimately you've got to take responsibility. Is the superintendent responsible for every decision ever made everywhere, anywhere? Of course not. You're leading a large and complex organization. My general summary of how this occurred was, number one, horrendously bad budgeting. Our folks made some honest mistakes, but honest mistakes by honest people, but they were mistakes about budgeting.
With big numbers.
Double counting revenues, misaccounting for costs, and then simultaneously bad information. And we've implemented some information systems the last couple of years that we didn't use the information appropriately.
Did someone lose their job over this?
Well, we're in the process now of sort of repeopling our financial operations. We are advertising now for a budget manager. I have appointed a new chief financial officer. Our accounting manager, who I think has done a good job, recently retired. So we just in the last week appointed a new accounting manager.
I mean, when you say you've taken responsibility, was there someone that you called into your office and said, "Hey, this happened under your watch," and here I assume the chief financial officer had said,
well,
"You gotta
certainly
go."
this has been
I mean,
reported
you
in the
lost
paper.
chief financial officer.
Yeah. I asked her to leave, and that's
Because
been
of
reported
this?
in the paper. I think I just lost confidence in her. Remember, we saw some of this coming very, very late, and I was very disappointed in her.
You are a numbers guy.
Yep.
You have a background in finance. You worked at U.S. Bank, Piper Jaffray, I believe, before you came to the school district. It surprises some that of the problems that one could have anticipated that we're going to be under an Olszewski public school administration, one wasn't going to be numbers. That was going to be something you were going to have control over, given your background.
I agree.
How can people now have confidence in going forward if numbers under your tenure have been the biggest problem?
Yeah. As a leader, you've got to rely on the information given to you. And as I said, I was pretty disappointed with the information given to me. At the same time, does this create issues of credibility? The answer is yeah. And I've said this from the beginning that as much as this is a fiscal crisis, we've also got to treat it as a credibility crisis. And I'm going to have to work to restore my personal credibility, but more to the point, we're all going to have to work to restore our organizational credibility, and that's why this audit is so important.
You said when this surfaced, this problem last October, that you're the right guy to take the district forward. Since then,
others said that. I simply said I'm taking responsibility for the
right.
problem. Let others decide whether I'm the right guy.
We presume you agreed. You're still here. But since that time, about 6 months' time, the teachers' union has come out with a no confidence vote. The principals' board has come out with a no confidence vote. You've had several schools that have taken no confidence votes. What do they see that you don't?
Well, I would say this, as a big city superintendent, and if you look across America, this is unfortunately the sad reality of big city school districts, is you really have to accept the idea that there's going to be conflict and controversy. And we went 3 or 4 years in the district without significant conflict like this. At the same time, I've got to admit and confront the conflict that exists there. As I said, I totally respect why the principals, why the teachers are angry about this situation. But whether I'm here or not here, the problem's going to be here.
Mm-hmm. Do the parents get involved in here? And right now you'll have the teachers and the principals who now have come out against June effect. If the teachers get involved,
Well, the principals still are voting.
Principals are still voting. Fair enough. Their executive board has voted no confidence, but not the whole union or not the whole group, and they're voting this week. If the parents get involved, at what point does this tip the balance, and you have to step aside?
Well, you've got to, as a leader, you constantly have to assess your ability to lead, and I think that's always a question that
Whether it's fair or not.
Sure, and I accept that comes with the turf of being a leader, and you've got to assess your ability to lead. This is a crisis time period. Again, whether I'm here or not, this problem is going to be here, and we have to, as an institution, the school board, the superintendent, we as an institution really have to make sure to take this financial crisis out of the windshield and put it in the rearview mirror, because it's a serious problem.
There are more and more people questioning about whether you're the right guy given the levies next year. 2 big levies that'll happen next February.
Yes.
I think about a fourth-year budget is up for a vote.
And a significant capital levy.
Do you worry if polls show that is vulnerable, that vote, because of your tenure?
Well, I'm worried every time we go into a levy election. I mean, I was worried last time, 3 years ago, with the 2001 levy vote, and we, I think, passed with 72% yes vote. So am I worried today? Sure. What saddens me most about this CR is all of the focus on me as superintendent and leadership really is distracting us from our mission, from our task of serving kids. And I appreciate why people are angry and want to focus on me. At the same time, this problem and the issues that are ahead of us far transcend me.
How many teachers needed to be laid off because of that $35 million problem?
Well, no teachers lost their job because of that. We eliminated 175 positions, mostly central office positions. Of that, about 50 people or so lost their jobs. We eliminated empty positions without people in them.
I assume that wasn't enough to cover the shortfall.
No, it was.
How did you balance it?
No, it was.
Well, did you have to sell properties and do other things
No,
too?
we had the deficit from last year, the $22 million, we fully absorbed with reserves. So we did not have to reduce at all services to kids or lay off a teacher or reduce any program at the school level. We're now selling properties to replenish those reserves. But we absolutely absorbed the $22 million without in any way affecting kids. This year's, we had, as I said, about $12 million. Our budget was out of balance, and we eliminated 175 positions or so to bring the budget back into balance.
All non-teaching?
Yes, all not one teacher lost their job.
What about this fall? Because teachers now, and part of why I think you probably won't win that vote is because teachers are worried about layoffs, and there have been rumors, and I think you even
Sure, I've said it publicly.
announced that there are going to be layoffs.
Well, we know we're going to have fewer teaching positions next year than this year. That's absolutely true.
But none of that is attributable, you argue,
correct.
to the past budget problems.
It's all related now to both reductions in state funding and the fact that our costs are going up without a commensurate rise in state and federal funding. So, sure, we're going to reduce teaching positions district-wide, maybe about 100 or so next year. We're just getting final numbers. Every year, though, we have 200 to 250 teachers leave the district. They retire, they resign, those sort of things. They move to another city. We're by law.
So no pink slips necessarily, but definitely lesser
on May 15th.
workforce.
On May 15th, we have to
10 seconds.
do these reductions, and most of our retirements happen in June. So we may do reductions in May and then hire people back in June.
You'll see. Joseph Olszewski, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Thea.
Up next, John Dunn. He's the president of the district's teacher union, who has called for new leadership at the district. When we continue. We now welcome John Dunn. He is the president of the Seattle Education Association, which represents over 4,500 teachers and employees of the Seattle School District. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have just come from a press conference announcing the results of the teachers' vote, and what was it?
It was overwhelming. We had over 3,000 members vote, almost 3,400 actually, and it was 85% in favor of seeking a new superintendent.
An audit's going to come out that's been commissioned by the school board. Why didn't you wait until that audit was released, I think the 16th of this month, before you took the vote?
We're convinced that the audit's going to have a number of things that need to be done. It's going to be quite comprehensive in its recommendations, and we're convinced that now is the time for the change to be made. This superintendent has brought us to the end of the search for what happened, led us through the first part of the recovery, and but the superintendent doesn't have the credibility with the voting public, and we're looking forward to the upcoming levy votes, and we're saying with the presentation of this audit at the school board that his work is done.
This stems, of course, from the $35 million budget problem that came to light last October. Do you, I guess you do clearly, blame him completely for that?
No. I mean, there was definite mismanagement under his watch, but he has accepted full responsibility, as he should, as being a leader. He is, and he has taken steps to right the wrongs that happened. But in allowing such a thing to happen, he lost major credibility with both our members and the voters, and he has not been able to reestablish that in our point of view.
Why not? If you say that he has corrected the problems, put in new procedures, number of the budget problems are behind them. They did use reserves, and they at least found the money somewhere. Do you acknowledge that he cleaned it up pretty quickly and they're moving forward?
But that wasn't at the expense of education programs, and that was not without affecting students in the classrooms and employees who are trying to bring those students to standard. And this has been his watchword for ever since he's been on board, is that we need to bring these students to standard. And if his mismanagement has caused us to have to stop or to take a step backward in that progress, then he needs to be held accountable for that.
The district will say that the $35 million problem did not result in laying off any teachers. They had to lay off some staff, some central staff, but they were also able to take from reserves and sell some properties, and not a teacher had to lose his or her job because of that. However, going into next year, there will be some teacher layoffs, but he will say, the superintendent, that those are a result of state cuts. So he's trying to back away from any responsibility for teacher cuts. Don't you agree that those new cuts for next year will be teacher cuts that are state responsibility?
No. He has not been able to terminate teachers or lay them off because of state law. Teachers are hired on a year-to-year basis and must be notified by May 15th that they will not be able to have employment next year because of lack of funding. And so consequently, despite all of the turmoil that's gone on, he has been forced to lay off non-certificated employees, people who are not covered by the regulations around certificated employees and their employment. It's different. So the layoffs that are coming next year are still going to be based on his mismanagement. He isn't able.
How so? If those are, let me just make this point one more time. If part of the teachers being upset, understandably, that many of them will be laid off next year, don't you attribute that to a state problem? That's a state funding issue.
Right. We acknowledge the fact that the state, the wranglings in Olympia are affecting some of this, but it is not as big as I think the superintendent wants us to believe, and because he's made all of the cuts possible in non-certificated areas, he's going to have to look at teachers for next year. In other districts that are affected similarly by cuts or projected cuts from Olympia, they're able to dip into their reserves in order to cover the losses. For example, in this district, $3.4 million was cut that went directly to the weighted student formula. That means employment of teachers and support for teachers. And our reserves was well over $6 million. We could have used the money to cover that if we had it, and we don't have it because of superintendent's mismanagement.
Because those reserves had to be spent to fill the $35 million problem.
Exactly.
And so they're not there to fill
Exactly.
the problem this fall. What's your strategy? You'll get out there, obviously, today, and the media will be interested in hearing the outcome of the vote. Then what happens? How much pressure will you put on? What more can you do other than a vote?
The pressure now has to be on the school board. The school board has to take control of the situation. They have to get the credibility and maintain credibility, regain it, so that the voters can feel that they can manage the money that the voters give them, both in Olympia and with the voters for levies. We have 3 levies coming up next year, and the maintenance and operations levy is critical. And if this board doesn't take control of the situation and maintain its credibility, we're saying we're facing a disaster, and the effects of that could be permanent.
If you acknowledge it's a crisis, and the superintendent really does, the argument then becomes a crisis is the worst time to change your captain. Let's wait until things are more settled, we get out of it. I mean, the guy who's at the helm now, the argument is the best person to get yourself out of it. He's close to the situation, et cetera, et cetera. What about that? Don't you cause a lot of disruption if the superintendent leaves as you want him to?
It's going to be disruptive regardless of when. And what we have to worry about is not only now, when will the disruption happen, but also what's going to happen in the future, and when can we do the best turnover. If we wait until after the levies have failed, there will be way more disruption than it would be if we were in an interim superintendency continuing to look for the right person for Seattle. But we cannot afford to risk that gamble on losing a levy.
Just have about a minute left. Do you think that this school district and this populace will not vote for the levy if he is still superintendent next February?
That's a major concern of mine. All we have to do is lose 10% of the people who support us, and we've lost a levy. My main fear is that the leadership of this district has lost that, or could lose that, if something isn't done soon.
30 seconds. The teachers have now spoken. The principals will speak next week. Will the parents ever speak on this issue?
Some parents have come forward. I'm thinking that others will as this continues after April 16th.
We got to leave it there. John Dunn, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are the president of the Seattle Education Association. We thank you all for watching. Join us next week for another edition of City Inside Out. Until then, on behalf of our talented studio crew here, I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Nick Licata. This stuff's really good. Seattle Channel. Gotta watch it.